Nick West, Jazz Detective by Mike Ellis. Prologue. A word to the wise and a warning to the faint of heart, the uptight, the prudish, the overly politically correct, and the square. This book contains hardcore, no-holds-barred pulp fiction. If you don't care for the likes of Bukowski, Hunter S.Thompson, Micky Spillane, Raymond Chandler, David Goodis, Chester Himes, Walter Moseley, Dashell Hammet, Henry Miller, to mention a few, or jazz in general, you most likely will not enjoy this book. If you decide, however, to read further, know that you do so at your own risk. I take no responsibility for the consequences. For those to whom this does not apply, I sincerely hope that you enjoy the following pages. A slice of life is rife with inhibition, superstition, the acquisition of meandering miseries, spurious injuries, yet we go on and on, ever forward towards the unknown. For those prone to action, there is always the fatal attraction that the moth feels for the flame. Book 1, Chapter 1. Sex and drugs and rock and roll have been my M.O. for as long as I can remember, baby. But jazz has always been my music. You dig? Nick West, Jazz Detective, Private Eye, Private Dick, Professional Snoop, sax playing, pistol packing, sleuth for hire. That's what I was thinking when I got into this line of work. After the bottom had long fallen out of my musical career, and I had tired of being just another downtrodden underground hero. I guess I fancied myself a dashing modern-day Bogart character, a 21st century samurai, a quick-drawn latter-day space cowboy. But reality can be a whole other can of worms and tedium, not to mention the inevitable proverbial plethora of moral issues, both great and small, that naturally ensue once you've crossed the line. There is, of course, the minor art of observing unnoticed, and the venerable art of war itself, but these abilities, once mastered, are rarely used to the right ends by anyone. It is a fine line that I tread. A hell of a sideline for a jazz musician, anyway. But there's no turning back now. And then there are the chicks. Man, they most def dig that aura of mystery. What can I say? Once a player, always a player. Well, let's get real now. The latter statement is no longer entirely true. There is once again a special someone, but long-distance affairs aren't always of proper solace, and are most def a drag at times. Those blazing blue-green eyes, soft as gingerbread milk and honey skin, strong, sensuous, sexy, savvy hands, full, luscious lips, sultry, lust-laden voice, and stormy personality haunted me every day and every night that we were apart. But that's another story. Tropical sun beams through my mind for a warm, nostalgic moment. 8 a.m. Espresso coffee, no sugar, and a spliff of Primo. I'm ready for action, scanning the photos of the case at hand that cover the walls of my air shaft view cubbyhole office. Miles and Gill in the background. My mind drifts back to the good old days, the glory days, when I was gigging every other night and living the life of Riley on the Tokyo jazz scene. Those were the days, my friend, those were the days. Speaking of Riley, It's a little Irish in most white folk, or at least the Irish seem to think so. Well, I'm just another American mutt. Black, Irish, white, Russian, with more than a dash of Teutonic Semite and a sprinkling of Chinese Cherokee roots thrown in for good measure. I think we're all from Africa originally anyway, you dig? As the great Duke of Ellington often said, it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Getting back to the case at hand, a particularly messy affair. Still don't get what the mayor's daughter sees in that lug. What a loser. Just another aimless, filthy rich white boy with a seriously addictive personality. Let's call him Special K for short. Coke, smack, uppers, downers, you name it, and he was into it. And let's not forget his penchant for good champagne and bad whiskey, rarely consumed in moderation. A real bad egg, if ever I've seen one. Personally, I'd like to fill him full of L-25 and tie him to a tree overlooking the Grand Canyon and let him scream his lungs out to the universe. It's time to talk to God, son. Now, Sweet Pea had been a very naughty girl and had become a serious political liability for Daddy. Quite a pickle, your unholiness. And you want to know what's going on? Well, be careful what you wish for, Mr. Mayor, 'cause as they say out west, it ain't purty. I had a Command Central appointment at 1600 hours. Man, that dude is such a square, and that phony military routine just slayed me. But I was just about to give him the dirty lowdown. That's what I was getting paid plenty for. Miles and Gill still in the background, more like the foreground. This I dig of them. The timeline of the intangible trudges ever onward, with all that is ineluctable ever in the looming. For a moment I am but a shadow of my former self. Whatever happened to that intrepid, talented, ambitious young man? Well, I guess disappointment. The bouts of poverty and heartbreak had taken their toll, not to mention the ensuing general apathy and ebbing inspiration that has also helped to beat me down spiritually. I feel weary for a moment, as if I were passing through a gray cloud of pure melancholy. But then my obsessive-compulsive disorder kicks in. Did you know that every good musician, and artist for that matter, is an obsessive-compulsive? My mind still wandering to the tune of Springsville. There was a discreet knock at the door. My nostrils flared at the luxuriant scent of her exotissimo profumo erotico, and my heart fluttered to the rhythm of her ultra-fox pheromones, which now permeated every available atmospheric molecule, projecting red-hot radiance incandescently in all directions, as she made her entrance splendiferous. "Hey there, darling," she drawled. "Well, if it ain't the infamous Tennessee sex kitten, Ava the Babe Morris, in the flesh, right here in my very own chambers. To what do I owe this honor, sweetheart?" I queried, with a spontaneous touch of twang tinging my speech. "I hope there ain't any duct tape in that bag of yours." She gave me a demure yet lascivious look, with only the hint of a smile, punctuated by that ever-present, mischievous gleam in her eye. Looking away, she did not gratify me with an answer. All Southern belle charm and all man-eater. I'm probably one of the only cats on the planet that this super mega vixen Dixie sex kitten has actually fancied bedding and hasn't of yet. Hence our enduring friendship, which I value tremendously. My mind drifts back to that 3 a.m. take your breath away all the way down to the Boots Cowgirl striptease to the strains of Stevie Ray Vaughan, one of her specialties. And man, those tits are heartbreakers. But we both had our noses full of blow, and that was back in the day before I discovered the beauty and usefulness of the blue pill. I can still hear the raspy, guttural voice of one of the great ambassadors of jazz pontificating backstage at a world-famous festival. "Don't know about you, Nick, but that shit always freezes my dick up into a thimble." Taking her in for a moment, I realized that there was some serious baggage under those baby blues of hers that even heapin' helpings of top-of-the-line makeup could not readily dissimulate. "You been partying hardy, or you in some kind of trouble, girlfriend?" Concern edging itself into my voice. Her eyes darted away for a nanosecond. I smelled trouble. Expertly composing herself, she replied innocently, "Can't a girl make a friendly social call?" She sure was one slick chick, no bout a doubt it. Glancing in turn at my horn gathering dust on its stand in the corner, the jazz saxophonist's universal mantra reverberated briefly in my soul. Bird and train, bird and train, bird and train. Should be running some train changes or chromatic pentatonic patterns, or maybe just some long tones. But saxophonistics, we're just gonna have to wait. Come on, hon, stop beating around the bush and spit it out, would you please? Mr. Mayor was all worked up, even for him, barking contradictory orders at every underling who crossed his path. For me, he reserved his patented enigmatic, supercilious smirk. "Well, Mr. West, what do you have to report? I haven't got all day, you know," he said irritably as we entered his plush inner sanctum. So the poor guy was having a bad day. Well, it was just about to get a whole lot worse. His Majesty winced and sucked air audibly through his teeth as I spread out photos of 3 different fun-filled, drug-soaked orgies in which his little sweet pea had more than willingly participated. The good side was that some color was seeping into those rigor mortis cheeks of his, which made him just a little less painful to look at. "Holy shit!" he gasped, momentarily losing his composure. "This isn't good, West. This isn't good at all." "Has anyone else seen these?" he demanded, the authority of his position and sense of entitlement having returned in full. "Nope. Scout's honor, Your Honor," I replied snidely. He gave me that reproving look that made lesser men grovel. I knew that the only things that he disliked more than irony were slang and colloquialisms. But then we had never attempted to dissimulate our mutual disdain. Reciprocal animosity was always in the air between us. We just tucked it neatly away under a veneer of false civility. "Who are these people?" he growled. "Here's a list for your perusal, Your Majesty." That warranted me yet another sanctimonious scowl as he arrogantly grabbed the proffered document. "I can't bear to look at these any longer," he whined, theatrically waving off the photo spread. The old goat was such a hypocrite. I'd heard plenty about his shenanigans before he'd become mayor of this fair city. He was getting hot and bothered, obviously working himself up into a lather. I bet it would be only a matter of minutes after my departure before his personal assistant made a call to a very special private establishment that catered to his very special needs. He reached into his desk drawer and handed me the prearranged 20 large in cash, which to his considerable annoyance I proceeded to count assiduously, musing that this ought to cover some of my outstanding bills as my money-grubbing fingers busied themselves counting the ducats. I took my leave as the fear and loathing began welling up inside of me, thinking how much that old bastard deserved to be somewhere off the coast of Easter Island, in the jaws of a hammerhead shark. Chapter 2. "He's got all my stuff," she blurted out. "Who's got all what stuff, Ava?" I queried. "Earl." "Earl who?" "Earl Sloan, the driver." "Whoa there, sweetie. Press rewind, would you please?" "Well, you remember my ex-beau Jerome in the mansion up in Rhode Island?" "Yeah, your French sugar daddy, a film producer, right? But I didn't know he was ex. What's up with that?" "Well, I just tired of him, that's all, baby. You know how it is. I just decided to cut and run. You know what I mean? Move back to Memphis and get a fresh start. So I hired Earl and his 18-wheeler, packed everything I own into that sucker one night and decided to ride shotgun. You know how I love to ride shotgun in a big rig, honey. All feigned dilettante in a valiant attempt to conceal the latent decadent. Liquid mercury sensuality conspicuously dripping from her tantalizing snake charmer lips. Being a man-eater can't always be an easy gig, but she was a natural. Girlfriend was a trip and a half. Now wait a minute, who is this Earl fella, and where'd you meet him? "At a truck stop," she replied innocently with an almost convincing ingenue smile. "Why, you nasty little truck stop tramp, you," I said with a knowing grin. She plowed on without gratifying my leer. "It wasn't like that, really, sweetie. Mighta coulda. But he got all sticky and anxious, you know what I mean? And I just wasn't in the mood. And you know I always gotta be in control, baby. You gotta regulate your idle speed with me, darling." Man, that southern drawl got you every time. And so I decided to jump ship without really thinking and let him get to Memphis under his own steam to cool off. You know what I mean? Yeah, just like she was barely conscious of rubbing her own thighs provocatively and purring her words alluringly as she sat on the edge of my desk in all her splendor. "And there I was, stuck in bumfuck New Jersey without a cent," she continued with a certain bravado. "And a knight in shining armor saved me the very next day," she said wistfully. "But we'll get to that later," she sighed. And he never showed up in Memphis, you know what I'm saying?" "You called the cops?" "Yeah, but when they showed, they were such arrogant assholes that I sent them packing pronto. You know how I am with authority figures, baby." "You and me both, sister. You and me both. But there's something you ain't telling me." "Oh, did I forget to mention the 25 keys of primo Jamaican weed?" she replied contritely, her smile tentative and brittle. She now had my complete and undivided attention. Chapter 3. Special K's real name was Jonathan Thurston Powell III, or should I say the Turd. Daddy was a big wig on the New York banking scene, old New York money with an attitude and a half, a commander of commerce, as it were. After dropping out of Harvard a couple of years prior, he'd been spending most of his time flitting aimlessly around the East Coast upper-crust party scene. Money has never been an object for our boy. Whatever Johnny wanted, Johnny got, and tired of soon thereafter. That's why his long-standing relationship with Sweet Pea was somewhat of an anomaly. 6 months. Wow, that had to be some kind of record for K-Boy. It was a piece of work to track him when he got kinky. I've already mentioned his propensity for bad whiskey. Well, that went hand in hand with his peculiar attraction to cheap motels and various and sundry drug-peddling losers on the fringes of the underworld. My stomping grounds exactly, if you catch my drift. It was kind of like he was posing for postcards. Our horny little high society sophista nymph, Sweet Pea, on the other hand, was another story altogether. After graduating at the top of her class from MIT, she had had plenty of prospects for leading a gratifying and interesting life, which now seemed to be going down the drain fast and furious. The copious amounts of drugs that our boy Wonder had been shoveling down her throat and up her nose definitely had a lot to do with it. Everybody knows you can't trust a chick that uses big time to do the right thing, or anybody else for that matter. But the inner workings of her existential angst eluded me for the most part. They probably had a lot to do with her relationship with Mommy and Daddy, but I'm no shrink. Mommy was a piece of work, old New York railroad money always at her beck and call, a real Park Avenue cunt if ever I've seen one. She busied herself throwing elegant East Side parties and recovering from them. Her charity works and art patronage were just for show, as they are for most of her ilk. She wasn't no Peggy Guggenheim, that's for damn sure. A sexless iceberg of a woman only interested in appearances and the one-upmanship of her class. She didn't seem to have been the child-cuddling type either. I guess it wasn't easy being the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Frankenstein. I felt kind of sorry for the kid. Sweet Pea was window shopping for an artificial paradise and didn't seem to be the least bit repentant or concerned as to the consequences. Flip-flop, another one bites the dust. As a now-deceased lush-life confederate of mine often said, if you're going to run with the devil, then you better have the Constitution for it. Amen to that, brother. Amen to that.